Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to this meeting of the Greater Manchester Police Fire and Crime Panel this Wednesday, the 18th of September 2024. I'm going to start off on the agenda. We're not going to go around and make introductions because we've got 15 items and 2 hours to do it. So you've all got labels in front of you. Hopefully you will all know each other, or if you don't, you can see who everybody is. Can we have apologies, please, Lee?
Yes, Chair, we just have a few apologies. Councillor Bridges, Manchester, Councillor Jeeva, Bolton, Councillor Walmsley, Berry, Councillor Dean, Oldham, and then independent members Angela Lawrence and Majid Hussain.
Have we any further apologies from the floor?
Councillor Garrido will be a little late.
Thank you very much for that. So, although I did do a formal thank you, in the absence of Angela Lawrence and Majid Hussain, I'd just like to record the panel's thanks to them for the service that they've given to the panel over the past 6 years. And we look forward to our new members, which will be an item on the agenda later on. So moving on to item 2 on Chair's announcements and urgent business. Just to acknowledge that this is the 12th anniversary today of the tragic loss of PC's Fiona Bone and Nicola Hughes. This morning at the event at the Cathedral, we had a 1-minute silence at 11 o'clock because we felt it was important that we noted everything that they did and their brave and courageous actions on that date in 2012 will always be remembered. Moving on to welcomes. Welcome Councillor Jake Austin. Councillor Austin is the new member for Stockport following Councillor Morrison standing down to focus on his new MP role. And our thanks go to Councillor Morrison for his contributions to the panel over the past 2 years. I'd also like to welcome back Jeanette Staley, who's been off and is back. And we hope you're okay and that we see you forever now. Thank you. I'm moving on then to the Deputy Mayor. Katie's now going to provide a verbal update on the BERD oversight arrangements and progress with the recommendations.
Yes, Chair, thank you. As colleagues will be aware, the BERD report was published in July, on July the 18th, and we have around 40 recommendations, mostly for Greater Manchester Police, some for the Mayor and me, some for national bodies, and all of those 40-odd recommendations have been accepted by the bodies affected by them. And we have agreed that oversight of their implementation will be conducted through a mayoral oversight group, similar to what we put in place to monitor the implementation of the Manchester Arena inquiry recommendations, and that mayoral oversight group will be chaired by me, reporting to the Mayor, but ultimately I will also be presenting regular reports to this panel, including a written report for your next meeting, and you will want to continue to track progress against those recommendations until they are fully discharged. We are seeing Greater Manchester Police in particular making good progress on a number of the recommendations. We have discussions arranged or have already begun with some of the national bodies, for example, the College of Policing, the Home Office, NPCC, to discuss the implications of the recommendations that Dame Vera made for those national bodies. And the Mayor and I are progressing the recommendations which were directed to us around, for example, our role in relation to complaints handling and oversight and scrutiny through dip sampling and oversight panels. I think it's important, Chair, that I'm accountable to this body for the implementation of all of Dame Vera's recommendations, either directly because they are directed to us in Greater Manchester, or to assure you of what we are doing to influence indirectly where they are for other bodies. Reporting to this panel will ensure also that we are being able to make that information publicly available, and we do understand rightly the extreme public interest in this report and the way in which Dame Vera's recommendations will be applied. And so I look forward to bringing further reports to you until, as I say, we and you are confident that the recommendations have been fully discharged.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. And now Deputy Mayor will provide an update on the Grenfell Tower inquiry recommendations and on GMCA and GMFRS implementation and oversight arrangements.
Thank you, Chair. The Grenfell Tower inquiry part 2 reported approximately 10 days ago and contains a substantial number of recommendations for the London Fire Brigade, for fire and rescue services across the country, for regulators, local authorities and others. And we are looking at a whole GM system response to the way in which those recommendations will be applied in Greater Manchester. We're very conscious that still a substantial number of buildings in Greater Manchester remain to be remediated. We are very conscious of the anxiety that will be causing to residents in those buildings. We're very conscious too that initially, the remediation requirements applied only to buildings taller than 18 metres, but that there will now be a requirement to apply measures to any building over 11 metres high, and that will significantly increase the number of buildings with which we have to deal in Greater Manchester. So in order to put that whole system approach together, City Mayor Paul Dennett and I will be overseeing jointly the way in which Greater Manchester applies those Grenfell inquiry recommendations. We will be bringing reports to the combined authority over the coming months. We will be supported within the GM system by reports both to the Local Resilience Forum and the Housing First unit, which the Mayor is establishing to take forward his manifesto pledges. And we are also required to write by the end of the month to the Minister for Housing, Rushnara Ali, with our immediate response to the recommendations and to present a full implementation plan to the government by the end of November. Colleagues will want to be assured that the government have indicated there will be additional funding to support the responsibilities that will arise for us in Greater Manchester falling out of the inquiry recommendations. And indeed, in our letter to the Chancellor of the Exchequer, ahead of the forthcoming spending review, we've been very clear that there will need to be funding for any new burdens that fall on local authorities, fire and rescue services, or indeed any part of the public sector. I think that's probably all I can say at the moment, Chair, because obviously it's an extremely lengthy report and colleagues, including Fire and Rescue Service colleagues and CA colleagues and others are still digesting it. But we will again, of course, and I know Ben and Dave too will ensure that we keep this panel fully updated.
Thank you for that update. And the final update will be an update on the early release of prisoners programme, which will come in a more substantive update at steering group.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I may have turned to our Head of Greater Manchester Probation, Chris Edwards, to supplement what I'm about to say, but the early release of prisoners at the 40% point in their custodial sentence happened now about a week ago, I think I'm right in saying, Chris, the 10th of September, just over a week ago. The numbers across Greater Manchester are small. I think our largest number have been discharged into Bolton district, and that's around 20. But other districts may only have 5 or 6 people being released back into the community. And as Chris will assure you in a moment, we've been very active in preparing for that early release tranche 1. There will be a further tranche to follow in the next few weeks. I would say that there is obviously real restriction on the nature of the offenders who can be released early. It's tied to the index offence for which they have been sentenced. It's not about the offender themselves. And I think, Chris, we would agree that insofar as we're seeing needs or breaches or other concerns about behaviour, they're not different from the pattern we would have seen anyway when people are released from custody. Nor, should I say, Are we seeing people who were not going to be released anyway? All that has actually happened is that cohort of people who would have been released into the community are coming back early and in a bit of a surge, which inevitably has placed some demands on our probation colleagues. But Chris, you may want to just supply a bit more information, Chair, with your agreement.
I can do, Chair. I can do that now. I was going to update.
That's fine. You're here now. Thank you.
Chair, I'm happy to update now on the prison releases. Yep. So I'm assuming people are familiar with the principles of this, the headlines. Early days of government, the new Lord Chancellor, I guess reflecting the urgency of the situation, made the decision, as Deputy Mayor has said, to release prisoners previously due for release at 50%. That's important. They were coming out at 50% anyway, to be released at 40% of sentence, and the scheme to be applied retrospectively. So there's 2 dates in the diary, one the 10th of September that's passed, the second the 22nd of October, which are the rebalancing points in the system. The September date, those that are eligible serving 5 years and under, and the October date, those that are eligible serving 5 years and over. But important to keep in mind, all prisoners being released who were previously would have been released 50% will now be released at 40% post the 10th of September. So those 2 dates are rebalancing dates, but business as usual will be 40% going forwards. And as the Deputy Mayor said, there are some prisoners excluded by the nature of their offending, around principally domestic abuse and violence. Little bit of context, system has been releasing prisoners early since about October last year under something called ECSL, End Custody Supervised Licence. So some prisoners were already coming out up to 70 days early. That scheme ended on the 9th of September, the new scheme takes over. The principal difference, ECSL was about policy, SDS, the 40% release, is law, and I think most people involved in the system prefer the latter because it's got clarity of release date. Whatever we may think about that, we know the release dates that people are coming out. Those are fixed. In terms of numbers, as Deputy Mayor alluded to, they've proven to be more modest than the initial headlines, and in fact they're less than the numbers quoted in your report, which I think are 137 in total. We had 120 people released on the 10th of September into Greater Manchester. You break that down by boroughs and you get a sense that the numbers are really pretty manageable. So I guess my analysis is extraordinary measure for the government to release prisoners early, not without risk because some prisoners are coming out sooner, so we have to manage those risks earlier in the community. But when you get into the operational implementation, it's not so far removed from business as usual anyway, and we're on with that. Final bit on prison releases, I guess from my point of view, there's been, as you can imagine, really tight scrutiny from within the Ministry of Justice down on us in probation regions, so things have been really tight. We've carried out all the checks and balances. For example, victim contacts, 100% victim contacts made on the release cohort, and a lot of learning in place for the 22nd of October release as well. So steady as we go, Chair.
Thank you for that update, and appropriate that behind you is the Prison Officers Association emblem, just saying. Thank you for those updates, and as I said, welcome to everybody that's just arrived. Next item is declarations of interest. Deputy Mayor.
Yes, I've submitted a form declaring my interest as a Governor of Manchester Metropolitan University who supply the reports and data relating to drugs trends later on the agenda. There's no decision being taken by the board today, so with your permission, Chair, I will be in the meeting for that item.
No problem with that. As you say, no decision being made on that item. Any other declarations of interest? In that case, can we move on to item 4, which is minutes of the meeting of the 24th of July 2024. I'm starting on page 5. Moving on to page 6, just to mention that although some members, on the appointments of co-opted members, some members have been here before, but welcome to Robin and Angela, who haven't been around the table previously but are here now. Page 7, the PFCP 3224 statistics breakdown on stop and searches by ethnicity was sent to all members by email on the 17th of September. Page 8. Page 9. Page 10. I understand there's an issue on page 10 on PFCP 4424.
Yes, Chair, if I may just make a correction to the minutes at the top of page 10 and that top paragraph where it says that the GMP website will be publishing details of the BERD implementation plan. Those updates will actually be for us to publish in the Combined Authority on our website.
Thank you for that clarification. On page 11, in the resolution for PFCP 4424, the Deputy Mayor has already presented that information about the update for the next meeting in progress and the Mayoral Oversight Board. Page 12, page 13, sorry, Councillor Bentham.
Yeah, under minute PFCP 4724, a question was asked by Salford City Council about the statistics on ASB motorbike related in Salford, and we were advised that there was potentially an element of underreporting in Salford, and that isn't recorded in the minutes.
Okay, so
Thank you.
can we make sure that that is recorded as an addition to those minutes? And then on page 14, under the resolutions on PFCP 4724, you also received the stats of the numbers of bikes seized in that email of the 17th of September. Page 15 and page 16. In that case, can I ask somebody to propose that the minutes of the meeting of the 24th of July are okay? Thank you, Vimal. And can I have somebody to second that? Thank you, Dane. So, Councillors Choksey and Anderton there. Thank you. Appointment of new independent members, item 5. This report is going to be presented by Jeanette Staley, seeking approval from the panel to appoint the newly recruited independent members of the panel.
Thank you, Councillor Emsley. I'm not going to take up too much members' time on this report because you've seen previous versions and hopefully the report in your paper pack is self-explanatory and been read. Needless to say, the process that my colleague has been supporting Councillor Emsley and other panel members with over the last couple of months has now concluded, and they are recommending to the panel that you approve the appointment of 2 new independent members for a 3-year term with a potential extension of another 3-year term of Steve Williams and Tony Gordon, and relevant information in relation to those 2 are included in your paper pack today. In addition to that, the recruitment panel are requesting the panel's approval to appoint a 3rd member as well, namely Duncan Craig, who was also a candidate on the day that passed all of their criteria. It is felt that the 3rd member is justifiable because this panel has had its membership broadened quite significantly over the last couple of years to include additional councillors around the political balance objective. So adding a 3rd independent member would add a better balance of independence to all of those additional councillors. If you do approve that 3rd appointment, it would be subject to us requesting us to extend our panel to the Home Office, and the Secretary of State needs to sign that off in the same way that they did do when we did the political balance one. So should you approve that, we will submit the relevant paperwork to the Home Office, and once approved, we'd then invite Duncan Craig onto that. And then just finally, if you'd allow me to, Councillor Emsley, should the panel confirm all 3 members this afternoon, I've already put arrangements in place to induct our new members and sent invites out to those. I'll ask the 3 independent members to come along to that as well.
Thank you, Jeanette. So we are requested to appoint Steve Williams and Anthony Gordon as independent members. So can I ask a show of hands on that appointment? Thank you. So I think it would be, the formal thing would be now to invite Councillor Williams, that's, whoops, Steve Williams, to the table. You don't need to make a speech, Steve, it's okay. Just saying, but you're officially round the table. And then, as Jeanette's just pointed out, one of the things was when we were doing the appointments that day, that we had lots of good candidates, but the thing was that we realised that having extended the political membership, there was an imbalance on the independent members. So are we okay to appoint Duncan as a third member, Duncan Craig as a third member of the panel, subject to the approval of the Home Office? Are we all okay with that? Yes, thank you for that. Item 6 was the Deputy Mayor's annual report. Do you want to just report on why that's not happening, please?
Yes, with apologies to the panel, we're not presenting this report today, but you have seen at a previous panel meeting the content, the written text of the report. So what you're not seeing today is actually only the designed up version, and that's as a result of some production delays. But it will be presented to you at your next meeting, I think I'm right in saying, Neil? Yes, we will bring it to the next panel meeting.
Thank you for that. Item 7, Police Complaints Report. This report is going to be presented by Neil Evans, providing an update on how the Deputy Mayor exercises the statutory responsibilities on behalf of the Mayor to scrutinise and hold GMP to account with reference to monitoring and overseeing the handling of police complaints. Reminder, Neil, we're on a time schedule. You've got 10 minutes or less.
Thank you, Chair. Noted. So I'll take the report as read. I'll just add some context to it. I'll just point out to members that this is a distinct report over and above the one that you receive on an annual basis that comes from Greater Manchester Police, that goes into more details about complaints figures and themes, etc. This report, as the Chair has said, is actually about two distinct statutory responsibilities that the Deputy Mayor fulfils on behalf of the Mayor. One of those is around the monitoring of complaints that come into GMP, and the second of those is conducting what are called police reviews of outcomes of police complaints that members of the public can request that are carried out either by ourselves or the IOPC as the relevant review body. It depends on the nature of the complaint as to whether it's ourselves or the IOPC. The current police conduct regulations are from 2020, and that followed a review that had taken place into the previous regulations. And I think it's fair to say that the thrust and purpose that government intended was that complaints would be dealt with more speedily, they would be dealt with at the lowest level, so that there was timeliness and that complainants could get the best outcome based on the level of their complaint. So it was very much about more learning and more prompt outcomes, and to avoid long-running investigations that was neither really fit for purpose for either complainants or police officers complained about. So within the report, there's a number of phrases which I'll just outline that sort of came through those police conduct regulations of 2020. One of those is outside Schedule 3, and basically going back to the thrust of the regulations about being dealt with at the lowest level. That's for really minor complaints that any organisation might receive. That might be rudeness on the telephone, it might be that a call hasn't been responded to promptly. And the idea is that a local officer can get in touch with that member of the public and resolve that very, very quickly, whether that be an apology, etc., etc. So that's called outside Schedule 3, and that's not formally recorded as a complaint. There's then, other than by way of investigation, and that's similar, but that is actually formally recorded as a complaint and goes towards the figures. But again, most of these complaints are often dealt with on districts by a local inspector, and it's where even if the sort of complaint was upheld, it's very unlikely or indeed impossible that the officer would face any misconduct proceedings. So as I say, they're dealt with locally, but the complainant does have a right of review with those types of complaints. And then the other method of investigation is where a formal investigation is necessary, that is either carried out by the relevant district or branch or indeed the Professional Standards Directorate, and those are more serious complaints. and those include where there may be an allegation of criminal conduct. So going back to 2020, I think in terms of how it's described in the report that the Deputy Mayor works with the force, their team and our team to improve the effectiveness of how complaints are actually dealt with. If we go back to 2020, that's when the force was in special measures. A lot of that was because of how calls were handled, arrangements on divisions, and I think it's fair to say that the vast majority of complaints were dealt with in districts, and whilst that wasn't necessarily reflected in the HMIC report that led the force to go into special measures, there's no doubt that complaints themselves weren't particularly handled well at that time, and that's the context within which ourselves, the Deputy Mayor, have been working with the force to improve that, and we have seen improvements that are outlined in the report. I think it's of note as well to say that certainly over the last 12 months we've seen that level of improvement and that level of engagement improve, and we've seen improvements in the standards of complaints handling. And indeed, I think it's important to note that Dame Vera Baird, she obviously wrote a chapter on complaints and made some recommendations, but she did note in there that she had spent some time with the current head of professional standards, Detective Chief Superintendent Mike Allen, who at that stage was fairly new in post, and she spoke positively in terms of the change that Mike was bringing to the handling of complaints through his leadership, and that's certainly something that the Deputy Mayor has seen as well. So the report outlines the various mechanisms that we've got in place and the improvements that we've seen. The second element of the report relates to police reviews. And as I say, they are a statutory process that's open to members of the public who are not satisfied with the handling from GMP. That changed in 2020 with the new regulations. Prior to that, there was a separate unit within professional standards at GMP that handled what were then called appeals, but the legislation transferred that over to the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, or in our case, GMCA. That is actually distinctive to the PCC or the Deputy Mayor, which I'll touch on in a moment. So for us, it's GMCA. We had one member of staff tupied over from GMP to conduct those reviews. And essentially, that's an examination of the complaint in its totality, all the paperwork that has been gathered by GMP. And although it's quite an involved process, essentially it's a judgment as to whether the handling and the findings by GMP are reasonable and proportionate. And there are some figures in the report that detail our findings on that. In terms of those reviews, if we go back to March of last year, 2023, we'd got about 220 reviews on our books, and they stretch back over quite a long period. So it was quite clear that actually the one member of staff handling those, we'd seen that before and we've increased that over time. But we've really focused very hard on that over the last 12 months, and I'm really pleased to say that we currently have a caseload of 15. So we're essentially dealing with reviews in real time, and that's really, really important in terms of defining themes, which we're much better at now, in my view, so that we can have live conversations with the force about that, which leads to that ongoing improvement. What is unusual about how we handle complaints, and that's why I've made the distinction between the Deputy Mayor and GMCA, is that I think the Deputy Mayor is one of two police and crime commissioners across the country that actually themselves sign off those reviews. So the Deputy Mayor scrutinises all of the reviews that we've done, and on occasion will go through all the paperwork. Most times she agrees with the work of our team, but on occasion she doesn't agree and will either uphold a review where our recommendation to her is that it's not upheld, or indeed the opposite. So that's quite distinctive and something that the Deputy Mayor remains keen to do. So that's the additional context that I would add to the report, which, as I say, Chair, I take as read. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Questions or comments? Barbara? Sorry, Councillor Bentham.
I'm okay with Barbara, thanks, Janet. I've got a question about resolved informally outside of Schedule 3. You did say in your additional information that the complaints handled outside of Schedule 3 are not recorded as formal complaints. But my question is there a formal recording of informal complaints? How are we confident that that figure of 1731 includes all complaints that were handled informally? So it's just about the how is it monitored? Thank you.
Yes, so they are recorded but not recorded. However, I think the question does go to some reform that's taking place at the moment, because there are different ways of making complaints into GMP. So there's on the website, or there's through the normal mechanisms, and through some of the ongoing dialogue that's indicated in the report. I'm not sure when it's due to start, but Terry may confirm that for us. But there will be one front door for complaints. So these figures will change over time. They will increase. There's no doubt about that. But that's important to make sure, and that's the point of your question really, to understand the totality of dissatisfaction, if that's what we want to call it, so that we can actually, working together, really understand the totality of that and really work on those themes, which, as I say, we've really enhanced over the last 12 months. Is that right, Terry?
Do you want to add anything to that, Terry?
So the amendments had been done this week, actually, in respect to that. From a general public point of view, it's no change. It's single online home, one route through GMP. As you may recall, a good 12 months ago, when we started the work on contact management, we were in a similar position in that there was lots of ways that lots of numbers knocking about for GMP. Everybody had a slightly different variation. We chunked that down for contact. That's how we've got to where we've got to with contact management. We're doing the same with complaints. So single online home, one route through, auditable, transparent, etc., etc. So that's what we've done. It's gone live this week.
Thank you for that additional information. We weren't supposed to be asking questions or making comments, but I feel that it's important that if you've got any that we do. So we're requested to note the contents of that report panel. Thank you. Moving on to item 8, which is standing together 2022 to 25, priority 3. This is going to be presented by Neil again, who's going to provide a year 3 progress update. Over to you, Neil.
Thank you, Chair. Again, I'll take the report as read. It's quite detailed in terms of priority 3, but I'll just perhaps highlight a number of things that are in the report. And first, in respect of reducing crime and antisocial behaviour, I think this is important in the context. Members will recall that I'm sure you've heard the Chief Constable and the Deputy Chief Constable say that their first 2 years of tenure was about putting the wheels back on, as they described it. But thereafter, it was a focus on quality. And I think some of these improvements that I'll note sort of speak to that. The Peel report last year showed good progress, but both the Mayor, the Deputy Mayor, and indeed the Chief Constable talked about further requirements for improvement. But I think this shows good progress. So in respect of neighbourhood crime, for example, that's reduced by 15.4% over the last 12 months, which is 41,000 odd crimes reduced based on the previous 12 months. Neighbourhood crime refers to domestic burglary, theft of vehicles and of the person, and indeed personal robbery. And again, you've got figures there for some of those offences. So residential burglary reduced by 9.8%, robbery reduced by 12.5%, and vehicle offences by 17.9%. I think I'd particularly draw attention to theft from the person. Over the last few years, we've seen significant increases around that, and that's something that the Deputy Mayor certainly focused on with the Chief Constable. And we've seen quite a significant reduction over the last 12 months or so. The vast majority of those offences are committed within the city centre, and there have been significant bespoke operations to try and tackle that have seen a number of offenders arrested, put before the courts, and that seems to have had a significant effect. In respect of all crime being solved, again, that's increased to 11.7% over the last 12 months. That's an increase of 2.2 percentage points. So more crimes, many more crimes being solved and have a positive outcome. In respect of antisocial behaviour, a slightly different picture in that we're seeing an 8.2% increase, and that's 84,000 offences. We know that antisocial behaviour is a significant issue for our communities. We know that it's a priority of the new government, and it's also a significant priority for us in Greater Manchester. And indeed, at our 6-monthly Community Safety Partnership event, which takes place in November, that I know some of you attended previously, where we get all the CSPs together and is led by the Deputy Mayor, we will be focusing on antisocial behaviour. I then go on to reducing road danger and making our transport safety, system more safer. A good reduction in road fatalities over the last 12 months. Of course, 45, for reasons that we all understand, is 45 too many, but that's a reduction from 64 the previous year. And there's really a lot of strategic, tactical and operational activity taking place across Greater Manchester as a partnership to reduce that further. Various elements of GMCA, GMP, the Fire and Rescue Service are involved in that partnership, and the Vision Zero strategy, which will go live later this year with the ambition to reduce deaths on our roads to 0. And indeed, we've refreshed the kind of leadership of that partnership. That's recently, the chair of that's been recently taken over by Dave Russell as our Chief Fire Officer. Vice Chair is now Terry Woods, our Deputy Chief Constable. So again, we will keep the panel informed on that. In terms of our transport network, obviously that's one of the mayoral ambitions in terms of the transport network. We've also got the B network and the finalising of the bus franchise in January of next year. And obviously the ambition is to get much more people on our transport system to contribute to economic growth, social activity, etc. That said, we know that one of the key reasons that may counter that ambition is both the level of safety on public transport and indeed the feelings of safety. And there's a significant amount of work that's going on in that regard. And there's reference there to the work of Operation Avro and what's been taking place across the network. And in that regard, we have a meeting with the Mayor on October the 7th, I think, with the Deputy Mayor, the Transport Commissioner, the Chief Constable and others to discuss actually what's our strategic intent and approach around making our transport system as safe as possible. My apologies, I'm going in the wrong direction. I just wanted to mention the few bullet points in respect of shoplifting. Again, there's been a lot of comment on that in the media over the last 12 months and beyond, and as a partnership we've been doing some significant work around that, and that's outlined within the report. So we've seen an increase of 22% in terms of recorded crime, but I think it's important to point out that we've also seen a significant increase in the amount of those crimes that have been detected, 23.2%, which is up 5.3 on the previous year, and the number of arrests has increased by 50%. It's worth noting as well that members will be familiar with Operation Vulcan that started in Cheetham Hill, indeed won an international award for problem solving at the weekend. And I think it's been explained to the panel before that the Vulcan principles are being rolled out gradually across the force. In Trafford, for example, those principles have been applied to the Trafford Centre, and I think that they're currently running a detection rate of 77% for shoplifting, which is clearly very significant. And again, we're looking for the learning there that we can take across Greater Manchester, so that's significant as well. There's a narrative in the report about the gender-based violence strategy, what's been achieved to date. Again, increases in domestic abuse outcomes, rape outcomes, which are mentioned in the report. That's positive. It's also outlined the other achievements that have been made in terms of the strategy delivery to date, and again, the focus of the priorities over the coming years. And the final thing I think to mention is the estate strategy, the estates strategy, the fleet strategy over the next 5 years, with zero emissions in our minds. That's obviously with a view to make the estate and the fleet as fit for purpose as possible, with continued financial constraints looking 5 years and beyond. But that's a significant undertaking, a significant piece of work, which obviously is important in terms of finance, but it's important to local communities in terms of where GMP are based in their communities and what the civic assets are that go along with that. So we'll keep the panel updated on that. Those are probably the highlights that I would pick out, Chair.
Thank you for that, Neil. Have we got any comments or questions before we move to approve? Councillor Lancaster.
About theft from shops and what action we're taking. I'd like to, I know you've given some examples in here, but it'd be useful if we knew exactly which areas you're doing and how successful it's been. Because certainly in my area it's still a major problem and it's not been tackled. In fact, they're not even been prosecuted. They're just been on the way and that.
So, Chair, with your leave, I'll take that away, discuss with my GMP colleagues, and perhaps between us we can bring something more detail back to the steering group.
Certainly we'll take that at the steering group in more detail. Any other comments? Councillor Anderton.
Just a very brief comment. I know you're refreshing the priorities at the moment as well, and it's just to focus down on antisocial behaviour and trying to define that a little bit better, because I know there's been some recent better definitions and categorising it into 3 different elements. And I think that will really help strengthen and help with data sharing across the partnership as well, to understand what that antisocial behaviour is, what's driving it, and what might be a symptom of it as well.
Yeah, I acknowledge that. Some antisocial behaviour is crime, some isn't. I think that's really the focus of why we want to hold that summit really in November.
Thank you, everybody. So can we note the contents of the report? Thank you. Moving on to item 9. This is going to be presented by Assistant Chief Constable Colin McFarlane, who's going to provide members with an update on the Right Care, Right Person approach, which is being implemented on the 30th of September. Sorry, my apologies. Deputy Mayor wishes to make comment before we open it.
I don't think the panel needs to spend a lot of time on this item, Chair, because I know it's been considered fully by you as we've been preparing for the go-live date, which is now the 30th of September. We held a readiness meeting with all our partners, health partners, local authority partners, police, fire and rescue service, a few days ago, and all our partners, I'm very pleased to say, have confirmed their readiness to go live on the 30th of September. We have substantial arrangements in place for the first few days and weeks to ensure that there's support both in the Force Contact Centre and escalation processes in place between and within our partner organisations and GMP. And there will be, of course, capturing of the learning along with measuring against performance metrics the impact of these proposed changes. We are almost the last force, possibly the last force in the country to be going live. We don't generally like to be last at anything, but on this matter, we of course have the benefit of learning from all the other forces that have gone before us, and we're going to be supported as we go live by the Metropolitan Police and Humberside, who were the first force in the country to adopt this model. The one thing I would just add is that the one element of the Right Care, Right Person work programme was to look at the Section 136 cases, which consume a very substantial amount of police time. And that's working on a slower track because the NHS are putting in place a Section 136 improvement programme, which is due to deliver by next spring. Because of that, and also because we do want to ensure that Right Care, Right Person is implemented successfully in Greater Manchester and actually improves the quality of service for our residents, we will continue to meet. My oversight group, my strategic oversight group, will continue to meet at least until next spring when the Section 136 programme is implemented, but also so that we can assure ourselves and the public of Greater Manchester that the Right Care, Right Person programme has brought the benefits that we expect, the improved service for residents, and also the opportunity to make use of the time that will be saved to policing, to address policing priorities better. Colin, I'm sure, will provide you with a little more detail. As I say, Chair, I think the panel are quite familiar with this programme now. And I am very grateful to all our partners, including, if I may say so, to local authority colleagues here today. Your DESs and DCSs who've put a phenomenal amount of work into helping us to get to this point for the 30th of September.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor Colin.
Thank you. Yeah, the Deputy Mayor very succinctly goes through what the paper largely outlines in detail, so I won't seek to repeat that. Perhaps just to emphasise a couple of points. As stated, we are one of the latter partnerships to go live with this. It is perhaps just worth clarifying that that was a collective decision made across the partnership because of the infrastructure that was needed in other organisations and the deferred previous summer go live to September has afforded them to get into that position of readiness. So I think that was the right decision, and we are, as the Deputy Mayor said, in a really confident position around our go live. I would also just emphasise and support the point that the Deputy Mayor made. A huge amount of engagement, consultation, process designing through our partners, and that work and that evaluation and review continues, as we've already heard. This is a continuing process to make sure we secure all those business benefits for both the public and the capacity it might release within agencies is realised as we go forward. And we have a full programme with which to understand that. And again, I'll just emphasise between now and go live, we have a number of consultation events further. So just put my glasses on to remind ourselves, the 24th and the 25th of September, we have elected members briefings. I understand we have around 100 elected members coming to those events, and I would encourage everybody who's available to offer that exact reassurance as to what Right Care, Right Person is. And I'll perhaps just conclude with one comment. It is a national programme, of course, and as a consequence of being one of the latter forces you hear of others who's gone live, I'm really keen to emphasise that when a matter is a real and immediate danger to life, or where we believe any child might be subject to potential for serious harm, the police are still coming. None of that changes. This is around when the categories are less than that and the police are not the right agency to respond. That is what Right Care, Right Person seeks to address nationally, and I'm confident that Greater Manchester will be supporting our partners in that endeavour from the 30th of September onwards. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So the panel is requested to note this model. Is there anybody that wants to make any comment or question before we move to that? I think we are, as I've put in my notes, ready for this. So we note the Right Care, Right Person model being implemented in Greater Manchester, and note the go live date of the first phase, which is taking place on the 30th of September. Colin's already reminded us about briefings on the 24th and 25th of September, and we note that the board will receive regular progress updates as and when required. So I've made a note at some time, a full report in November, question mark?
Chair, I believe that was what the panel requested earlier this year, that we would do only a very brief report to you today ahead of go live, but that we will give you a full report at the earliest opportunity after implementation to, I hope, assure you that that has gone smoothly, that we are learning any lessons that have emerged early from the implementation, and to give you the opportunity to feed back on behalf of your residents if you are picking up any reactions, concerns, or indeed success stories, because we would be very keen to capture those too.
Thank you for that. So the panel notes the model, and the panel notes that they will receive regular progress updates as and when required. Yes? Thank you. Moving on to item 10, which is the GMP plan on a page. Deputy Mayor, do you want to come in before we start this?
This is a really vast programme of individual transformation projects that has been running in Greater Manchester Police following the appointment of Chief Constable Stephen Watson in 2021 as part of the recovery from special measures. I will let Lee describe the detail of this report. I really just wanted to say, though, to the panel that the process, the programme management process and oversight within GMP that has been put in place, and the assurance that gives to me and members of my team attend the programme performance meetings, is exemplary and has been recognised not just by other police forces as something from which they hope to learn, but actually from other public sector bodies well beyond policing and criminal justice. It is a really significant, really substantial, multi-million pound programme of change projects. It has been exceptionally well led and delivered, and it's something I think I would like to acknowledge, of which Greater Manchester Police should be very proud.
Thank you for that. So turning over to Chief Resources Officer Lee Rawlinson. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to the Deputy Mayor. It is a very complex programme. For those members who aren't aware, plan on a page, it is just simply that. It's what was the plan to try and get this force back into a strong position. But of course, it's not as simple as a plan on a page. As the Deputy Mayor said, you know, we're over 100 transformation programmes that we've been running in parallel, all which are interdependent. So if you pull a thread on one, it impacts the others, and we need to know what that map looks like. I think Mr Evans has quoted quite a lot of the success that's been happening across the GMP. It is built on the foundations of this programme. What GMP has already been reported as trying to do was, first we wanted to get the basics really right. That was get the quantity of the work that we are doing up. Then there was a focus on quality. And for the second year running now, Greater Manchester Police is the most improved police force in the country. We are definitely going in the right direction, and it's down to much of the work through plan on a page. I won't repeat a lot of the successes, and you can read the report for yourself, but I will draw out some of the key highlights. Through this approach, through a programme management approach, we introduced neighbourhood policing to strengthen the support to communities. That model now, we are well ahead of many other forces that are just starting on that journey to start neighbourhood policing. So again, credit to GMP there. The Force Crime Management Unit, we are now much stronger at investigating all crimes, improving the standards of investigations and crime recording, and that is significantly improving the quality of those outcomes. And again, that's some of the work that the Deputy Mayor mentioned is being looked at by other forces to see how we operate on that scale. The call handling work on 999s and 101s, I think, if I'm right, as of today, we're still at 3 seconds for 999s and around 41, 42 seconds for the 101s, which again is putting us right at the top of the tables and therefore the best service to the customers. Much of those things come back to workforce planning, people management, digital strategies, digital planning, all those investments that we've put into the right places to improve the services and reduce failure demand. On that digital front, we are enhancing the digital contact options, so members of the public have more pathways to get digital work in. No disparaging comments to age profiles, but there are lots of younger people out there, a lot more savvy and able to report things in a lot better ways than perhaps I could do nowadays. And we need to make sure we innovate ahead of that so that we can receive it really quickly. The investigative resilience, increasing our accelerated completion of detective portfolios. So again, really strengthening the detective side of our work, and that helps again with the Mr Evans report on the number of positive outcomes that we're achieving. Criminal justice, we've strengthened the criminal justice hubs and the governance of that, improving performance. So, for example, with the programme approach into criminal justice now, Mr McFarlane has led 80% of our pre-charge files are being accepted at the first triage. That's up from 40%. So, again, more efficiencies, better use of public money and better leading for outcomes. Improvements in our custody branch, so we've put about £3 million of investment into some of our custody, and as you reported earlier, Deputy Mayor, the Dame Vera Bird recommendations, we were already well on with some of our custody work, which would help into those recommendations. Our Professional Standards Directorate, again, we've touched on that in terms of complaints, but we've seen significant reduction in open complaints through PSD. It has dropped by around 3/4. The rest of the report, Chair, runs into lots of the positive aspects of it, but I just wanted to touch on really towards the third arm of what we're trying to do now. So we improve the quantity, then we improve the quality of what we do. The third phase is the sustainability, because as everybody in this room will appreciate, funding is tight across all sectors at the moment, and that doesn't exclude policing. We need to make sure that we can maintain the momentum that we've built whilst returning a good value for money and a good service, because the purse strings are getting tighter. So the sustainability of these services, putting in mid to long-term plans as touched on, such as the estates example that Mr Evans quoted, means that we can give some assurances back to this board over the next few years that we will not only have built this force back up from where it was to where it should be, but it should stay at those positive messages going forward. So I'll end there for any questions, Chair.
Thank you very much. Anybody got any comments or questions? Councillor Barrett.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about the phase 1 of the neighbourhood policing, where it says there will be 1 PCSO per ward. That was just something because I was understanding that the PCSO's roles were being reduced. So I just wondered if you could explain how this will work. You know, will there be a PCSO per ward, or because I know you were recruiting more neighbourhood police roles. Yeah. So it was just kind of, I was under the understanding that the PCSOs were not being recruited actively.
Yeah, the original model.
I'm going to say I'm going to ask Deputy Mayor to answer this one.
Okay. No.
Okay. Sorry, Lee.
Yeah, obviously because it's the panel is scrutinising my oversight of this programme, so it is important that you can hold me to account. And obviously this has been a very key plank of our neighbourhood policing model, and I acknowledge not an uncontroversial one. Police and community support officers are rightly very, very valued members of our workforce, but colleagues will remember that the balance that we had in Greater Manchester Police between warranted officers with full powers, for example, of arrest, pursuit, stop and search and so on, and police CSOs who do not have those powers and have more of a community engagement role, we felt was out of kilter, particularly when you look at the performance that GMP had been delivering, which had resulted in its very low rate of bringing cases through the criminal justice system when they needed to be, and to bring people to justice. So getting that balance right is key. And it's taking longer, to be honest, Councillor Barrett, than we had expected to get those numbers into the balance that we want, because we've been absolutely determined that we will reduce the number of PCSOs through natural attrition, and that continues to be taking place, but rather more time is needed before we will reach the balance that we actually want to achieve. And in the meantime, I think that in terms of the outcomes from the neighbourhood policing model that's now in place, I'm very confident that the argument that was presented to me by Greater Manchester Police for doing this is the correct one, because we are seeing that increase in both detections and solved outcomes of criminal conduct. So while I'm conscious there's still some way to go, and I know that individual members will from time to time get in touch to say that they were promised that they would know who their team were, or that the officers wouldn't be moved around, or you know, they can't get someone when they need them. Broadly, the model is, I'm assured in my scrutiny, is the right model for Greater Manchester. As far as individual wards are concerned, we are trying to, and neighbourhoods, we are trying to maintain as much stability as possible. But colleagues will understand that people do move on, they seek promotion, they may move out of the area, family circumstances and so on. But I continue to encourage elected members to let me know if you've got concerns about the stability in your local neighbourhood teams, because this is an absolute key plank of the way in which we are transforming our approach to keeping Greater Manchester's communities safer.
Thanks. I would just say, yeah, obviously the rise with the ASB, I think, is very much linked to the fact that where in particular wards where there aren't those key people in place. That's something that I've experienced, yeah. Thank you.
Yeah, and I would just add to that, Chair, if I may, that the problem-solving hubs that we've placed in each district and the tasking model that is in place now in neighbourhood policing will absolutely be brought to bear on exactly those issues. And again, we're beginning to see that bear fruit, Councillor.
And also that I have to say, the PACT meetings that have been implemented have been amazing, and they have really brought the community together. So I think that's, yeah, it's just, yeah, it's baby steps, I suppose. Yeah, thank you.
Do you wish to add anything to that, Lee? No? Right. Terry?
Would you mind, just because of the model side sort of sits towards my side, I think just to emphasise two key things. One, and I know it's just not GMP, I know it's across the public sector, the rate that people exit the organisation slowed down massively. And same with the local authorities, same with NHS, same in private industry from what I'm told. So our calculations that we based on what's worked for 10 years round what we anticipate the exit rate of PCSOs has been, it's just slowed down. So people, be it the economy, I don't know why, but that's a factor in this. The second one, just and this is me just straight talking. We have now got a neighbourhood model that will be the envy of every other police force. So, and it is just not, and I know you don't think this, by the way, it's just not all about your PCSOs and your community beat managers. So it's got 4 key aspects to it. So number one now, in place in every district, and we've got a force governance team that sits behind this. You've got a prevention hub. Much of that's multi-agency, but you've got an inspector in every district and a prevention hub that's driving Vulcan-type activity. That's in place. I've double-checked that. That's fact. Your second aspect then is every district's got a neighbourhood crime team. They're focusing on those high-harm things like burglary, very traditional stuff, but stuff that the vast majority. So, again, in team, in model, in each district. Third aspect then is a neighbourhood tasking team, and that's some might for your local PCSO and your local beat cop when they need some extra support at a local level. Neighbourhood tasking team, they're getting you wanted people in communities, and again, sound structure. Then your final part of that, very important part, is your PCSO and your beat cop. Those 4 component parts is what neighbourhood policing is in Greater Manchester. It is really robust, and it's governed by Matt Boyle, who's ACC. And again, it might be either through task and finish or whatever you would want, Chair, that at some point we sort of, because I think rightly we zone in on PCSOs, but actually the package for GMP now, it is a very, very strong package.
Thank you for those reassurances. I'm going to move on now to Councillor Anderton, then Steve, and then yourself, Robin.
Thank you very much. Just picking up on a few comments that the Deputy Mayor just made. Obviously, it's taken longer to establish than we expected, so just asking when do you think that this will be fully established and fully embedded, and why has it taken a little bit longer than expected? But just coming, I'm sorry to talk about my own district, but I think things like PAC meetings, they're relatively new to our district at the minute, but we are picking up pace. So I'd like to just have an idea of what's the piece looking like across GM then. Is everyone doing PACT? Have we got gaps in between? A second part of that as well is what we're struggling with in the Wigan district in particular is the geography of how the neighbourhoods on the GMP level have been designed, because they're designed on older ward boundaries, and we've had massive change, as I think every district has at the last all-out elections and so on. So for an elected member, I don't know sometimes who my PC is because I'm straggling 2 or 3 different old ward boundaries and so on. So for me, it's an ask at some point, you know, would you consider aligning back to aligning to new wards at the moment as well. So that them are my key questions at the moment. Oh, sorry, last one is extractions. I do know that my inspectors in Wigan are still being extracted onto response. So it's when will the neighbourhood teams, this more envious model, be KPI'd ring-fenced, and therefore we can really strictly look at those outcomes.
I'm going to take all the questions and then Deputy Mayor will answer them. Steve?
Cheers, Janet. Thank you. Lee, when I look back to the last time I was on the panel and the Forest got putting special measures in those dark days of 2020, if you'd have come to me and said, we're going to be doing what you've just advocated, I'd have gone, yeah, okay, it could take you years, that pal, it could take you ages, but the colossal amount of work you've done has been really extraordinary. Did you think when you first embarked on this, you get to this point?
Right, so I'm going to ask Lee to answer that now, and then we'll take Councillor Anderson's questions in a minute. Thanks, Lee.
Yeah, the ambition was always really high. I think that what we've achieved in the space that we've achieved, the quality we've achieved it, I think is a phenomenal achievement, and that is down to a lot of hard work from a lot of people. There's a lot of blood, sweat and tears gone into this, because the pride of all the staff in Greater Manchester, when it was in special measures, it wasn't due to the individual officers. They were still great officers. What it needed was a proper leadership structure put around it, and that was the first fix with Mr Watson, Mr Woods coming in. Myself, we've tried to put that in there, so I'm really pleased with it. I'm proud of it. We want to keep that momentum going.
Thanks for that. I'm now going to go to Councillor Garrido for a question and then come to Deputy Mayor.
Yes, thank you, Chair. First of all, I apologise if what I'm going to say has been covered previously before I came on the panel or whatever. Two things. One, first of all, I'm concerned at the PCSOs or the reduction in PCSOs. Certainly, I've always found the PCSOs to be a strong link, certainly within the area that I serve and in other parts of Salford. I'm concerned that the weakening of that link will have a significant effect on the policing in the area. I see our PCSOs at least once a week, very often more, at some event, whether it be a coffee morning or a community lunch or whatever, and they're very much the link between the police and the community. So I just want some assurance there that we're not actually going to end up weakening that link and bad reduction. And secondly, in fact, the other thing that concerns me, over the years, and unfortunately I've been around for many years, we've seen lots of different models in terms of improving neighbourhood policing. It tends, I have to say, to be the poor relation. In so much as, yes, we set up a nice new model and it works for just a little while, and then for some reason or other, we start losing the inspector or we start losing officers. The inspector might serve for 12 months. We get assurances, no, I'm going to be stopping here forever. We'll continue, the work with the community will get snaky, but they don't. So some assurance, in fact, that we're not going to have another organisation, another new neighbourhood set up, which is going to be, again, weakened over the years by officers being taken away to other areas. We really want neighbourhood policing to mean true neighbourhood policing, and that's, the link with PCSOs, the link with officers.
Thank you for the questions. Just to say, Councillor, yes, obviously some of what you say has been covered, but that's not a problem because we reinforce whatever it is. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you very much. So to Councillor Anderton's questions about why the delay and when do we think we'll get there, as I said earlier, one of the issues has been the rate of attrition, which, as Deputy Chief Constable Woods has explained, hasn't been as rapid, natural attrition as we had expected among PCSOs. And also there has been a lot of other change going on within GMP, including the centralisation of the crime recording process, which has meant that we've been changing the response model alongside the neighbourhood model and the preventative models. And naturally, we're doing all that against the backdrop of, as I say, individuals' personal ambitions, family circumstances, and aspirations. So I would say that it was always a very ambitious programme. The model has withstood some of the sort of fluidity that has been experienced right on the ground. There has been no deviating from the underlying principles that we are seeking to deliver because and I think, you know, we've had the model in place now for 18 months. We're at the point where we are beginning to see it's making a really effective contribution, significant contribution to the improved outcomes that Neil, for example, was describing a few minutes ago in relation to reducing certain types of crime, preventing certain types of crime and improving the solved crime rate. But I think Councillor Garrido's point about the community relationships is incredibly important too. And that's not all down to the police PCSOs. It's also something we expect of our neighbourhood warranted officers to build those very strong and maintain those very strong community relationships too. And that's essential because one of the things that we have invested so heavily in neighbourhood policing to achieve is because they are our intelligence eyes and ears. If those police officers and PCSOs are effectively embedded in communities, we get better intelligence right across the police from, you know, the antisocial behaviour and more minor crimes that nonetheless cause great misery to your residents, right the way through to the intelligence that actually supports some of the work we do on serious organised crime and indeed counter-terrorism. So they are very key members of the community effort. And we would not want to weaken that through this model, Councillor Garrido. It's a really important point. The packed meetings, I think what I'd say, Councillor Anderton, is that I would say different districts, the elected members may want to feed back to me on this actually, and I'd warmly welcome that, Chair. I think it's not so much whether they're happening as whether they're happening effectively. And I think in some districts they're perhaps not proving yet as successful as in others. And I think that's something that we need to continue to work on and improve. And I really would welcome input from elected colleagues so that we can give attention to that with Greater Manchester Police, because they are a very important part of the model of, again, reinforcing that community police relationship. And the abstractions, a perennial problem, Councillor Anderton. I would say that our response officers are effectively in the neighbourhoods. And I think officers themselves tend to be a little bit prone to complaining about being asked to do a different aspect of what is the continuum of the job at times. So we are actively, sometimes we do have to move officers from one district to another due to operational pressures. But when an officer in your neighbourhood is responding to an incident and he is an officer or she is an officer from your neighbourhood, I would say that isn't an abstraction. That's keeping those officers in your neighbourhood dealing with and responding to and gathering intelligence to prevent excuse me, to prevent crime in the future. But it's a key measure, both that we look at, that I look at as part of my scrutiny process. It's also one that I know HMIC at national level is paying careful attention to. If I may just finally say to Councillor Garrido's really important question about, is it the poor relation, are we going to keep chopping and changing the model? I am absolutely confident that we have a world-class model in place now in Greater Manchester Police. As Deputy Chief Constable Wood said, other forces are seeking to learn from and actually envy our model. In Assistant Chief Constable Matt Boyle, who has the senior officer oversight of the programme, I think we've got a real grip on its practical delivery, and Matt carries out assiduous performance management of each of his district leaders, and I've seen the way he calls them to account. It's very, very compelling, supported by really good data. I take reports very regularly to my Deputy Mayor's executive 6 weekly meetings on the progress of and the impact of the neighbourhood policing model, because, to be honest, the Mayor in particular and I invested a lot of political capital in it when we launched it last March. So we have a big stake in its success. And that's why it forms a very significant part of my scrutiny activity, and because it's probably the most important thing GMP do as far as your residents are concerned, I can absolutely assure elected members it will remain very, very high on my list of personal priorities.
Thank you. I'm sorry, but because of time constraints, I'm going to have to move on. Just to say packed meetings, I would ask for a return from all members on how things are going in their different areas. In Rochdale, we have 5 townships. They don't all have the same organisation in each township, so it might be useful to gather some information, Deputy, yeah? So that Jeanette will do that. Yeah. Thank you. Note the contents of that report and move on to item 11. Update on police vetting procedures and performance. I am aware there may be questions on this. Deputy Mayor, do you want to introduce it?
If I may, Chair, and then I'll hand over to Deputy Chief Constable Woods. When I became Deputy Mayor at the beginning of 2023, I think this was one of the hottest issues affecting policing nationally. It was in the aftermath of the Wayne Couzens case. It was just as the David Carrick case was proceeding through the courts, and there was rightly absolute public consternation that such individuals could continue to serve in British police forces and had been able, apparently, to do so despite the vetting processes. As a result, nationally, every police force was required to go through a process of washing all our data through the police national computer and following up any concerns that were flagged as a result of that data washing exercise. For GMP, that was a very, very substantial piece of work for our force vetting unit, and one that I took a great deal of interest in and paid very close attention to in my early months in the role, because I knew it was absolutely central to beginning to rebuild the damage that had been done by the Carrick and Couzens cases and others to public trust and confidence in policing. And I'm very pleased to say that, as you will see from the reports, there has been real progress within GMP in terms of the way that the Force Vetting Unit is operating, the rigour with which vetting is being carried out, the response that GMP has in place where individuals are not successful in the vetting process. Those people are not going to be recruited into or staying in GMP if they don't meet the standards that we expect of people in policing, and that isn't just police officers, it's police staff, and vetting also, of course, applies to other visitors and contractors who may have access to GMP systems and premises. It remains, therefore, an area of considerable interest to me and ongoing scrutiny. But I would say now to the panel that the next challenge I will be presenting back to GMP is to examine within our force to what extent we are seeing disproportionality in vetting outcomes, because again, that's something that has been flagged nationally. It is, I can't say at this stage whether it's an area of concern for us in Greater Manchester or not, but I've no reason to believe we would be that different from the national picture, and that will be the next thing I will want to assure myself of, that that vetting process is being conducted objectively and producing outcomes that are not systemically discriminating against certain groups or members of the community.
Thank you, Deputy Mayor. Terry.
Thanks, Chair. I would echo everything that the Deputy Mayor's just said in respect to that. It's a detailed report. Dare I say it, it's a bit a dry subject. Sorry, Jed, who's our vetting lead. And it is pretty complicated. It's quite technical, but I'll just pull the stuff out that I sort of see relevant in between the two worlds, really. And I will touch on actually the disproportionality, because there is some data within the report that you can sort of start to see that, you know, it does beg the question. We do have most of the answers actually in respect to that. And then I'll try and keep as much time for questions, Chair, if that's all right. And that's where perhaps Jed might come in if we get very technical. So, I've been a DEP now for coming on for 6 years in two forces, so I've seen two different variations of vetting units, and I described the vetting bar. And this talks a little bit to the disproportionality side, but we've got to keep that bar really rigid. We can't flex it. We can't afford to flex that bar. It needs to stay rock solid, because that is our safety net on behalf of the public and you and everybody else of what is, I would say, an occupation that carries the most power over the public operationally. So we've got to have, and I'm very clear, and I know Jed is operating on my behalf, we are pretty rigid on that, and that is the safest that you can be for your organisation. And I do think, post all the different reports, you see in most forces, if not all forces, a very similar approach in respect to this. Clearly, people get vetted when they come in, and everybody does. I'll touch on the different levels. But I am very conscious, and one of our key priorities is the ongoing vetting process once people are in, because people's circumstances, as it does in life, changes. So, as I run through, the vetting as a standard, it's not a GMP standard, it's a national standard. It's covered by authorised professional practice, APP, by the college, so it is a, you know, you should be able to go to any force and you can expect a common thing to happen. It's a national standard, it's not something that we decide on or make up. It's been supplemented in recent years, as the Deputy Mayor has said, around things like recommendations from HMI reports, and also the Casey review and various other inquiries that have happened, and in particular the Carrick issue, as we know about. So they come with some extra recommendations, and we track every single one of them, and I do that on a daily basis. So the structure is we have a very large, because we need one, because of the size of our organisation and the amount of work that goes through there, and a very structured department. Jed, not just because he's here, but of all the vetting managers in the UK, Jed is one of the most experienced and certainly one of the most effective ones that leads that department. That reports into professional standards, into Mike, and that reports into me. So vetting is me. It's my responsibility, personally. We've, as well as the process, what we've done over the last certainly 3 years now under Jed's leadership is that we've invested quite a bit of money in there around people. We've changed some processes, we've changed the structure, and frighteningly, we were on paper, and we've now gone into digital. So the sort of the housekeeping side that you would expect around business change, etc., is well on with that, and you see that through some of the improvements that we've made. Rightly, there is also a very clearly defined appeals process for when people don't get through, that can be followed. There are, as detailed in there, 12 principles that we work to. Again, for brevity, I'll not go through those. Those are documented. And then we touch on the report the minimum levels. So there is a minimum level of vetting for all police officers, special constables who are volunteer police officers, and for police staff including PCSOs. And that's a recruitment vetting that gives you a 10-year period. We do have higher levels of vetting then depending on your role. From the very sort of lowest, which is your agency staff, through to people like myself who deals with counter-terrorism and what have you, that's developed vetting that's a really in-depth look at you. We do reject a lot, and the data is in there, and as you can see from page 105, what we have had in the last few years, and you've just got to be careful with some of our data when you read this, is that with the Police Uplift programme, the 20,000 officers that were put back into policing, we've had a huge bubble, as we've talked about before in this meeting, of recruits. So we've had big batch recruitments going through, which has caused a significant amount of work in vetting, but we've been, and I know Jed is very clear that we maintain that bar, but just when you look at some of these figures, you've just got to bear in mind that that's not the norm. We're entering now into a period of normality, and things will settle down. If I go now on to the refusals, accepting I'm going through a lot of data here, but about 14% of candidates are refused. That's 162 on the last cut data. 55% of those appealed, and of those 97% were unsuccessful. We do listen, but as I said, that first point it's a pretty rigid filter to get through. There isn't much sway in it, and if you pass, you pass. If you fail, you fail. We do listen, and there's the odd one that we'll reconsider, and it's either a mistake or an interpretation issue, but they're the absolute exception, those, and very rarely, as you can see, actually happens. In respect of, so this is page 108, there is a cut of data around proportionality, disproportionality in the table, and if you look, 88% white, 77% BAME as it's classed there. In relation to that, that's for cops and special constables, and perhaps bring that out in the questions, Chair, if that's okay. And as the Deputy Mayor mentioned on page 109, on the back of the Met case, there was an instruction given out that every single person in policing had to be washed through, rechecked through the Police National Database. That for us was a huge, huge piece of work. That was done at pace, in truth, but in detail. And you can see from page 1110, all that work. So that's basically checking everybody through another Police National Database that gives you live any issues, and that washed out of every single one that we checked, which I think was for just over 13,000. One police officer and one police member of staff being subject to disciplinary investigation. So 2 people on that. So in summary, Chair, and again, I'm sorry for going through it so quickly, because it is really important to us, this. This is our main filter into the organisation for what I think is a very, very important vocation that we get right, and we've got to get the right people in, and also the ongoing filter is clearly important, but I'll pause at that point.
Thank you, Terry. We appreciate that you do find it very important. Barbara.
Thank you very much, Chair. Recruitment vetting is valid for a period of 10 years. I think that's an awfully long time, especially given that people who work in the security industry are re-vetted every 3 years. They have to have a DRB check every 3 years. So I think, I mean, I'm not the same person that I was 10 years ago, and I think that is an awful long time. I'm really concerned at page 104 of the report, there's no statutory gateway to dismiss an officer who cannot achieve the lowest level of recruitment vetting. That to me is hugely concerning. And although the report says there's no statutory gateway, I think I'd like an assurance that there is a mechanism that you can dismiss an officer if he would no longer qualify to become an officer in the first place. That said, I am reassured that 97% of appeals are unsuccessful, because I think that does demonstrate that correct decisions are being made at an earliest opportunity. So thank you.
Thanks, Councillor. Deputy Mayor.
Thanks very much, Councillor Bentham. And I suspect when you say 10 years seems a long time, you reflect the public's view as well. As Terry has said, we are working within the national parameters for vetting, and we are absolutely not deviating to loosen them up in any way. And we are also, of course, constrained by the fact that officers are they're not employees. They hold office under the Crown. And so we, although we've been able to make use of some of the processes that arise as a result of the new entry routes into policing, and GMP has been well ahead of the game in using some of those to get student officers out quickly where it is clear that they should not be in the force. Again, the processes for dismissing officers are restricted by the statutory framework in which we operate. I think Terry or Jed may want to add a little bit, but I sympathise with the optics of what you were saying.
So if you're all right, Chair, I'll pass to Jed, just because I think we can offer a good dose of reassurance actually on the first point. If I just cover the second in respect of vetting, we're we're pushing quite hard now, actually, around if people's vetting is withdrawn, which is a rarity because of the filters that we've got when people come in. We're exploring what I'd suggest are new routes around if we employ police officers who can't carry vetting. It's very rare, and perhaps at a later one, because I think we'd have some good examples to talk about at a later one. At that point, that we can offer reassurance around that. It's a very rare occurrence because of the safeguards we've got in. But I think on the 10-year thing, if I just bring Jed in, because we've got a number of safety nets.
Yeah, if I can just come in on that, is that the thing about policing, if you have a look at industry, is, you know, that we've got synergy between an anti-corruption unit, you've got a forced vetting unit, you've got an overt professional standards unit. I can actually call in somebody's vetting anytime I want. I can have a review of that vetting done anytime I want, and I do that on a regular basis. Should we get adverse information coming into us, action is taken. It is always that the police conduct regulations will take primacy. So if we identify conduct, then it's dealt with by the professional standards unit on that basis. I'm in regular dialogue every day, anti-corruption, professional standards, anything adverse coming in, then action's taken. I can also say where we get any change of circumstances, and people are reporting those frequently to us. People are looked at on a regular basis. When a person changes role inside that 10-year period, we're looking at people again. If anyone moves into a designated post, which is a post needing a higher level of vetting, again, someone's looked at again. I think it's very important that we stay and with the national profile and the College of Policing authorised professional practice, and that the GMP unit actually works inside those parameters set nationally by the college.
Thank you. I'm aware that we're well behind schedule in terms of timing, so I'm going to warn members now. It's quite possible that we may go past 3:30. All right. I'm going to take that now as finished. Note the contents of the report and the action taken by GMP's Force Vetting Unit to protect the integrity of the force and safeguarding both the public and the workforce from the risk of corruption and or behaviour that does not accord with police service values. Can we note that, please, panel? And now moving on, we've been police focused, but here we go to the Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service, the annual delivery report. Over to you, Deputy Chief Fire Officer Ben Norman.
Thanks very much, Chair, and good afternoon, everyone. I'll try and move swiftly through it. So, the panel, many members have been on the panel in previous years when we brought this report, the third report of 4 within the Mayor's fire plan period. So there was obviously commitments under our 6 priority areas in relation to improvements to the public services that we provide. And I'm pleased to say that in this period, we've detailed 44 change-related projects that allow us to deliver better against those priorities, and they're obviously listed under the relevant headings related to response, the built environment, our culture, and other related matters. So I'll leave panel members to obviously have a look through those, and happy to take questions in relation to the changes we've delivered. The other half of the report and the other key purpose is to ensure that we're delivering against the key performance indicators and we're delivering our statutory duties as required. And page 116 of the pack takes you through some key areas in relation to where those performances are against our key performance indicator matrix. 26 of our KPIs are obviously listed. 65% have a positive direction of travel, 35%, 9 of them, a negative direction of travel, and section 5 underneath explains why some of them are either new or don't have a direction of travel related to them. I think just to touch on that further is those that have exception either positively or with greater scrutiny for the negative ones, just to show panel members that I host and chair a quarterly performance board, and where there is a shortfall, we call items in and we use a deep dive principle. So absence management would be an example, increased rates of fire fatality would be another that have been through recent boards, And those deep dives from a scrutiny perspective progress from our internal governance through to the Deputy Mayor's meeting, where the Deputy Mayor and her team give further scrutiny to the areas of focus in relation to the KPIs, and then we make further amendments and changes accordingly. So to bring one as an example to you, we were already on with some work around the fact that we can find that those that come to harm and have accidental dwelling fires, and particularly those that are hospitalised or tragically lose their life from fire, we still don't have a high enough referral rate into fire for our home fire safety assessments from those that have been supported by another agency. So whilst we were already looking at our data sharing agreements, we've treated that piece of work. So we're working with obviously partners across the broader Greater Manchester to accelerate that work, to increase the volume of partner referrals, so that those that are at high risk of having a fire and poor outcomes in the home have an increased chance of a fire service visit, to be able to put that smoke alarm in and those safety measures in place. So I'm just picking one out as an example. And then the latter part of the report goes on to talk about assurance. So panel members will recall we've brought the annual statement of assurance here as we're required under the national framework, but the annual delivery report talks about that, and it also gives some detail with regards to Her Majesty's Inspectorate of Fire and Rescue Services outcomes. And again, I won't share any detail with that because you've had reports in that regard here at panel previously. So we're asking today for you to note the contents of the paper, and we'll be publishing the annual delivery report and declare the successes that our brilliant staff have delivered through 2024 through that process. So I'll stop there, Chair.
Thank you, Ben, and we really appreciate the work that's gone into putting the report together, and also by your members. Do you want to comment, Kate?
Just to say it's been a year of really very significant achievement in Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service, recognised by the very, very strong inspection result that we received a few months ago. And I'm very grateful to all of our staff in GMFRS, because they've really delivered an exceptional fire and rescue service to the people of Greater Manchester.
Any questions or comments other than those already made? So the panel notes the contents of the paper and the full annual delivery report, and we move on then to item 13, which is the culture first update. Back over to you, Ben.
Thanks again, Chair. This is a summary report, and I suppose what we're intending to provide through this report is, we know there's a huge amount of focus. The now Fire and Policing Minister previously held the sector to account in a previous role when she had members of the Inspectorate, the Fire Brigade Union, and senior people from within the sector in front of the Advisory Committee, and looking long and hard at culture. There's much been in the media, and my colleague Sue, that leads on our culture and inclusion, that's with us today, has spent hours poring over many reports that either initially looked into LFB, London Fire Brigade, and then other fire and rescue services, the thematic review from the Inspectorate, which didn't name services, but we were one of the 10 services where they looked at it from a sector's perspective. And I suppose the key aspects I'm trying to bring to life through the report we share today is to reassure you that our Chief Fire Officer in Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service weren't reactive to this work. In fact, when the Chief arrived, he detailed within the matter of these first few days that his 3 strategic priorities for the organisation on arrival were culture, culture and culture. He created some real clarity with the Chief's 10 asks around values, behaviour, and examples of that would be one like the last item 10, where he asks all colleagues in November 2021 what it's like to be on the receiving end of you. So we put it at the very heart of it before we saw any LFB reports, matters in the media and such. So we've been proactive in our approach. We moved to utilise some good practice from the NHS in terms of freedom to speak up before the sector was prompted to have a route for staff to raise concerns, where the sector's now moved to an approach in that regard. And in July last year, so a little over a year ago, we took the innovative step to create what was a culture-first approach across everything in the organisation. So culture first being the first item of every single meeting, and as you can see at the bottom of page 155, a number of key milestones that we took. So the rest of the report details in terms of how some of those things, as they've come about, have been through the governance of the Deputy Mayor's Executive. So we've took an analytical review of reports that have gone to either individual fire and rescue services. As the report goes on to say, we had our second independent review by Practice to Progress. That report went to the Deputy Mayor's Executive. So that scrutiny has been playing through in the last 3 years as those things have come out in an individual sense. But today's paper was to try and bring some of that together to give you almost a reassurance, looking at it as a mosaic rather than individual pieces of work, to give some reassurance of the collective. It gives some overview in relation to the purpose of the Culture First Board, first board of its kind across the sector, independently co-chaired by Sunita Gamblin, a former Deputy Chief Constable and Queen's Police Medal holder. So we've had some real good scrutiny and support from an external audience. And then the other key aspect is we've had some amazing response from our staff colleagues. So we've had staff volunteer to be part of a sounding panel. We've had the staff representative groups who represent the diverse groups. Sue stood up and chairs a practitioner level group to ensure we're delivering against our equality, diversity and inclusion plans and ensure that all of the key activities are moving on. And then the latter two parts talk about the fact that we've tried to bring this together recently, and it's been our most successful both internally and in terms of reach to support our recruitment aspirations around a We Are GMFRS scheme. And then the very last section I draw your eye to on the bottom of page 159 it details some of the successes we've had, particularly with regard to the inspectorate, which the Deputy Mayor alluded to as part of that formal report, but also informally the lead inspector has cited us when called to the House to talk about culture. He does cite Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service in response as how things can be done. So, as I say, a summary overview of a great deal of work, but we're trying to bring together several strands of culture into one report to just give you a flavour of where we are on the topic. Thanks, Chair.
Thank you. And noting that on page 159, the external recognition, a tremendous number of awards in there, Ben. Just to say that there's all sorts of awards for all sorts of different parts of that culture that you're talking about. Deputy Mayor.
This is the top priority of the Chief Fire Officer and senior team in GMFRS. It's a top priority for me, and as Ben's indicated, we bring a report to every single Deputy Mayor's Executive on progress in delivering the Culture First journey. It's also a top priority for the newly elected government and the new Home Office Minister, Diana Johnson, and I'm very pleased to say that she'll be visiting Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service next week, specifically because she wants to see what has been put in place. So in addition to all the other national recognition detailed in the report, Chair, we've been very keen to showcase to Dame Diana, and she's been very keen to come to see the work that we were doing, which was cited to the Home Affairs Select Committee before the election when she chaired that committee. And so we're delighted to have the opportunity to show her up close what's going on here in Greater Manchester Fire and Rescue Service.
Thank you for that, and we appreciate that you're getting national recognition on that one. Because of shortage of time, we're going to move on to the next item, but we're going to note the contents of that report and provide feedback. Okay. Item 14, Reducing Harm and Offending Strategy Year 3 Update, to be presented by Alison and Chris.
Hello, thank you. Thank you, Chair. I'll make 3 quick contextual points and then hand over to Chris. Firstly, you'll be more than aware that we've currently got a police and crime plan consultation for drafting a new version. And one of the areas that we want to consider is how to better align the GM probation reducing reoffending plan, and particularly alignment and link to local reducing reoffending boards. So we're kicking off that piece of work in alignment with the current consultation. So something you might want to look out for when we bring the draft version back. Secondly, to remind everybody that we do have unique arrangements in Greater Manchester through our Justice Devolution deal and our Memorandum of Understanding for leading on commissioning of rehabilitative services for people on probation, which is getting some national interest in terms of the ability of us to flex our resources across Greater Manchester. We're embarking on the next phase of commissioning of those services, but it is subject to the spending review. And also, we do have wider ambitions to build out from what we've already learned from delivering those services to ensure that we've got a robust but fair diversion framework in Greater Manchester, including out-of-court disposals. Thirdly, as mentioned at the top of the meeting, with regard to early prison releases, I wanted to reference the fact that the victim element within that. The probation service does already have a victim liaison service, but that has criteria. So we've seized the opportunity to test referrals to our multi-crime gateway service. So we're currently in the process of making sure that any probation practitioner who identifies any victim with concerns or issues about the early releases can make direct referrals as a safety net to our support services. As mentioned, the Deputy Mayor has taken a role in leading on partnership briefings around the early releases, and we've created a risk register. One of those is around one of those items is around public reassurance, and it's something we're very alive to and are feeding back to the Ministry of Justice, because I do believe that some of the national messaging has not been helpful in terms of public reassurance. But I'll now hand over to Chris, who'll talk you through the main items.
Thanks, Alison. So I'm going to talk a little bit about some of the services we put in place. I don't intend to go back over the prison release stuff that we spoke about earlier, but can field any questions you may have. So look, without being complacent, I think we should be pretty proud and pleased about how far we've embedded this thing called GMIRS, Greater Manchester Integrated Rehabilitative Services, and CAS 3, Community Accommodation Scheme 3. These are sets of services designed to help principally prison and probation staff to reduce reoffending in Greater Manchester. And as Alison said, we do have a unique model in the way we set this up. This is not replicated in other parts of England and Wales across probation. They are co-designed and co-managed between probation and the combined authority. And I think what that gives us is the benefit of bringing in voluntary sector organisations from the local community and tailored to the local community. And as a result, all our allocated funding from the Ministry of Justice flows into these services. And I'm not seeing that in other parts of England and Wales either. There are underspends in other parts of the country, but all our money is flowing through. We've got really good referral numbers, and we've got good visibility of these service providers across all our probation offices in Greater Manchester. Particularly excited about the Wellbeing Service. These are hubs in each of the local authorities run by a voluntary sector network, focus on lower level mental health, but we're hoping also we can build out from these and build in other complementary services like accommodation support, for example. And we are currently considering, as Alison has said, how we can build on the first cycle of GMIRS commissioning into the future, and how can these services currently ring fence for people formerly on probation or being released from prison, how can we build out to encompass support for those who may be in and around the criminal justice system but not yet fully sucked in a sort of diversionary space. So we're looking at that. Word on the prison accommodation release scheme, again, uniquely set up. So the money from the MOJ flows through to local authorities to commission accommodation units as part of an integrated model. You'll see in the report that we've placed 2,049 prisoners in post-release intermediate accommodation since 2021. And I would say that's a considerable step to reducing reoffending in Greater Manchester when you consider the risk when someone is immediately released from prison in those first hours and days. That's made a significant difference for us. And we have the highest performance nationally for what it's worth, but I feel like I should say that in this meeting. Mental health pathways, just three things to finish. The Wellbeing Service I've talked about. We've got stronger and better links with community mental health teams. We've employed some health and justice workers in the last couple of years, and they're a useful bridge between core probation staff and core mental health staff, so that's an improving picture. And something called mental health treatment requirements, you may know, are court orders that have been pretty underused actually since they've been on the statute books. But we've trialled in Bolton and Wigan, and we're now looking to roll out imminently starting 1st of October across the rest of Greater Manchester. So we hope that will also benefit local communities as well. So an encouraging picture in my submission to you. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you both. Any questions or comments? Councillor Bentham.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I've just got a question around the community accommodation service. The report states that there were 4,687 referrals and only 2,049 were placed. So what happened to the other 2,500 people?
Not all are suitable, and probably across our accommodation services, that's been the picture. There's been high referral numbers, but not all are suitable. Also, one of the strengths locally, our MOJ-funded accommodation support scheme is part of a network. So we also fund a bed every night scheme by the Mayor, and there are other accommodation schemes as well. So some will go elsewhere. Some people are, of course, released homeless, but it's a relatively small number. So all those that are not going into CAS 3 aren't necessarily drifting out of the system. We've got kind of tabs on all of those, and we would feed them in. But, you know, the working reality is some people do come out from prison and are released homeless, but a considerably smaller number than I would say 4 years ago plus. So, you know, not a benign space, but a much improved space.
Thank you. In that case, we will now note the contents of that report and move on to item 15, which is Damien's Organised Crime Annual Update and Forward Look. Over to you, Damien.
Thank you, Chair. It's a real pleasure to present this report to you today. I think the work that Greater Manchester does in terms of tackling serious and organised crime from a partnership perspective is a real strength of the way in which we work, recognised by HMIC FRS last year in their inspection, which found that GMP was good, the ROCU outstanding, and noted the strength of partnership activity in this space. You'll be well aware that in terms of tackling serious and organised crime, it's an international endeavour. We have a really strong kind of national, regional and force level approach to tackling serious and organised crime. And what we recognise really strongly in Greater Manchester is that in order to be able to do that effectively, as well as the pursue bit, which is dead important, we also need partners to come together around the prevent and the prepare bits as well. So we invest a huge amount of time in terms of how we collectively come together to address those under the banner of Programme Challenger. Challenger's been going for over 10 years now, and as I say, we're really proud of our achievements in that time. I think the paper shows in quite a lot of detail the kinds of things that we consider to be top priorities in our Programme Challenger strategy. And as the paper explains in a lot of detail, there's a huge amount of activity taking place across the 4 Ps under each one of those thematic areas. Given time, I'm not going to go into a huge amount of detail because I'll take the paper as read, but I just wanted to pull out a few of our really key successes in the last 12 months. So under the County Lines priority, you'll note that in 23-24, the County Lines team exceeded the line closure target set by the Home Office in achieving 155 drugs line closures against the target of 120. And so far in the first 4 months of 2024, the team's achieved 64 line closures, so we're well on target for our, we're well on course for that target of 150 by March next year. Under modern slavery and human trafficking, since July 2023, Greater Manchester Police and its partners have run training and awareness sessions with over 1,200 individuals in 40 separate sessions and events. And that includes training 300 modern slavery champions at Manchester Airport to support the identification of potential victims who are being trafficked through the airport. Under organised immigration crime, Greater Manchester Police, again supported by partners, have significantly increased the intelligence collection collection in this area to become the force with the largest or the highest number of organised immigration crime related intelligence submissions nationally. So a fantastic achievement by GMP and partners on that one. Specifically in relation to the Western Balkan criminality, which I'm sure you'll know is a key priority nationally, engagement visits have taken place to 15 businesses in North Manchester in particular, acting on intelligence there, which led to 13 arrests and 12 charges. Under the drugs one, again, conscious of time, and Mark's going to talk in a bit more detail about drugs in a moment, so I won't go too much detail on that one. But under firearms, through Operation Viable, which was launched in May this year, there's been 19 firearms recoveries, and they've dealt with that across 23 separate incidents. As importantly, though, there's been more seizures in the first quarter of 24-25 than was seen in the totality of the previous year. And finally, just to say that we are coming to the end of the current 3-year period for the Programme Challenger strategy. It's the second one of its kind, so we're just about to embark on our third. We've set out some of the areas that we think we're going to cover in that new strategy, but clearly that's going to be based on significant engagement with partners and looking at how we really build on the successes that we've already achieved to date. Thank you.
Thank you, Damien. Any questions or comments? Thank you. So we note the contents of the report and move to our last item. Item 16, Greater Manchester Drugs Intelligence Function. Kate, you're going to introduce this despite the fact that you have an interest in it.
Oh, sorry, it's just been pointed out to me. I've said all that without the mic on. We're hosting a significant conference next month in Greater Manchester, which will be very much focusing on that harm reduction approach to using the intelligence that we've got about drugs use in Greater Manchester. But I'll hand over to Mark to say a little bit about the detail of the reports.
Thanks very much. So I won't go into it in too much detail, but you can see from the paper the drug-related death system that we commissioned from Liverpool John Moores University. Our drugs early warning system that brings together professionals across our 10 local authority areas. The GM Trends research that we commissioned from Manchester Metropolitan University, which, as I've noted, directly informed Operation Vulcan in Cheetham Hill. It was that research that really exposed the extent of illicit prescription drugs markets in that area. And alongside the operation of the drugs early warning system and the GM Trends research, we have drug testing conducted by MMU under a special Home Office licence. Very importantly, we have Mandrake, which is a partnership between GMP and MMU, that testing facility that enables us to get drugs tested rapidly. So we regularly take drug sweeps from police property stores so that we can monitor what's going on in terms of purity and adulterants. But if there are significant incidents, we can get the drug. If we can get the drugs, we can get them tested. And I'm not just saying this, it is the best in the country. It is recognised as best practice, and I think it's an excellent example of a partnership between the police, local authorities and an academic institution. In terms of drug trends and threats, I've provided an overview of those and highlighted the threat that was posed by nitazines, synthetic opioids, associated with around 300 deaths so far this year. But as I've pointed out, it's higher than that. That's an undercount because of delays in toxicology and because there isn't systematic testing of all drug-related deaths to see if there are nitazines present. A lot of the focus around nitazines has been on the fact that they've been found in adulterated heroin, but increasingly people are alive to the issue, and we certainly are in Greater Manchester, including colleagues in GMP, of the fact that nitazines are showing up and causing deaths where people have purchased online prescription medications. Obviously they're not prescribed, but you understand what I mean when I say prescription medications. So they're illicitly obtained on the web, and they don't always contain what they say they do. I mean, in a nutshell, and I've been doing this for a while now, I would say this is probably the most dangerous time to take drugs ever in terms of understanding what's going on. It really is concerning. But we are as prepared as we can be because of the intelligence system that we have and because of the relationships that I've just described. And we're planning a resilience exercise in October to test that. The other thing, I won't go into all of the details, the other thing is the issue of THC vapes. So THC being the active component in cannabis. Originally, when we first came across these with collapse and kids being taken to hospital, when we tested it, we found that there was synthetic cannabinoids in the vapes, so spice, in other words. And that was relatively easy in terms of getting a harm reduction message across for our services and to give to teachers, which is, you might think that you're buying a vape that sort of like is going to give you a hit like cannabis, but did you know that what you actually got your hands on is spice? Relatively straightforward. Now, and they tend to be more expensive, now there are an increasing number of THC vapes that actually do contain THC, which makes it more difficult in terms of a message. But again, alongside that, these are illicit, and you don't know what is in them is the main message. You can find out more about this in the special report that the Deputy Mayor mentioned, alongside the special trends focus that we've got on ketamine, and the main GM trends report that will be published in October and will launch at the same time as the event that the Deputy Mayor mentioned. I'll stop there, and if anyone is going to ask any questions or is thinking about getting out the door, I'll answer any that you have.
Thank you, Mark. Kate.
I just wanted to really emphasise that our strategy across the whole of the Greater Manchester system in relation to substance misuse is to reduce harm through gathering data and sharing it as much as we can with professionals and drug users so that we can help them to protect themselves. And at the same time, from a criminal justice point of view, we are absolutely concentrating through programmes like Challenger on going after the organised criminal gangs who are profiting from what becomes significant human misery as a result of the misuse of drugs. So I would want to reassure colleagues that we have a care element which is really important to us in protecting vulnerable people, but we have a very determined focus on the organised criminality and the substantial profits that are being made by those criminals and the exploitation that they are then visiting on our communities, including children in our communities who are running through the county lines. So it is a twin-track approach and one that I think we would want to reassure the public we will be sticking to.
Thank you for that. Councillor Anderson.
I will be very quickly and just want to say I really welcome this report, but going down on the vaping aspect of it as well, I think there's a role here for trading standards as well, because I think they're sometimes one of the first ports of call into what might just look like a news agents and then under the desk and things like that. So I just want to kind of big them up in it in a way, because in my district alone, they've been kind of the avenue where bigger things have been unveiled and relieved. I'm sure that's the same across the district, with masses of like £200,000 worth of vapes in single seizures being taken, and I'm sure those are not legitimate or will have other substances in them as well. So it's just kind of strengthening where you're getting stuff to test, going across the partnership as well through those various groups.
Thank you for that, Councillor. I'm just going to make a comment that I pointed out the other day. Somebody asks, what do community safety do? And, you know, when we're looking at cuts in council budgets, often community safety is one of the primary straight up, oh yeah, let's cut that. No, because what they're doing is some of what you're saying, and it's part of what you just reported. Right, enough rant from me. Moving on and saying we consider the contents of that report. If you've got any questions and you want to do any feedback on that, can you get back to Mark, please, on it? We know the GM Trends report will be published in October, and those will be circulated to us as panel members. You have one other item, item 17, which is for information. If you've got any comments to make on that, can you please make those queries through to Lee? And then finally to say, I am very sorry that we've gone over. It's only 11 minutes. Our next meeting is on the 18th of November at 2 p.m. We'll be at GMCA. Thank you very much for your time this afternoon. Meeting closed.